When you have to stop but don't really want to, stop at BP. Because BP has everything you need to keep it going. Fuel to keep the adventures going. The BP Me app to keep the savings and the commutes going. Snacks and drinks to keep the crew going. And the BP Me Rewards Visa to keep the rewards going and going and going. A stop at BP isn't a stop at all. Keep it going.
Welcome to the award-winning Thoughts from a Page podcast, a member of the Evergreen Podcast Network, hosted by me, Cindy Burnett, a voracious reader and book columnist who provides you with casual author conversations and book recommendation episodes, as well as insider information on all of the newest releases that I personally endorse, and on the publishing industry in my Behind the Scenes series. With so many books coming out weekly, it can be hard to decide what to read, so I find the best ones and share them with you. For more book recommendations or to find my backlist of interviews, visit my website at thoughtsfromapage.com. Have you read a book recently that really resonated with you and makes you want to read more books like it? If so, submit a read-alike request to me through the Google form included in today's show notes and tell me why you loved it, and I will suggest some similar reads on a future Tuesday episode. If you are interested in reading some great books before they publish, I hope you will consider joining my Patreon group to access digital early reads and pre-pub author chats, as well as my new Traveling Galley program. For May, my early read selection is Banyan Moon by Tao Tai. For June, The Bones of the Story by Carol Goodman. And for July, The Book of Silver Linings by Nan Fisher. The link to join is in my show notes. Today, I am chatting with Paige Toon about Only Love Can Hurt Like This. Paige grew up between England, Australia, and America, and has been writing emotional love stories since 2007. She has published 15 novels, a 3-part spin-off series for young adults, and a collection of short stories. Only Love Can Hurt Like This is her first novel published in the United States. I hope you enjoy our conversation. And now for a quick break. For the last year, I have been focusing more on my health and eating habits. In connection with that, I have started drinking AG1 in the morning. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my health and energy levels. That is because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. I recommend AG1 to all of my family and friends because the company has a team of doctors and scientists. It is tested for 950 contaminants and is NSF certified for sport. It is formulated based on the latest science, and it maintains high quality standards. Thanks AG1 for sponsoring my show. AG1 is a supplement I trust to provide the support my body needs daily. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/thoughtsfromapage. That's drinkag1.com/thoughtsfromapage. Check it out. And now back to my show. Welcome, Paige. How are you today?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm so excited to chat with you, and we're getting to talk on your actual U.S. Pub Day, so congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's a very exciting, nerve-wracking moment for me.
I get that. And you have published all sorts of books and sold so many copies, and this is your U.S. debut, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Well, so that's doubly exciting.
I know, it's been a long time coming.
I bet so.
Hence the nerves today.
I get that. But I checked on Goodreads before we hopped on, just to kind of remind myself about everything, and the reviews are glowing, so you clearly have nothing to worry about.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I haven't checked my Goodreads yet today, but I must do that.
Well, I don't know. I always say to authors, maybe you don't need to check it. You don't know. I don't know. It's one of those nerve-wracking things, but they're so good, you should go ahead and check it.
Oh, thank you.
Before we get started, why don't you give me a quick synopsis of Only Love Can Hurt Like This?
Okay. So this is the story of Ren, and at the very beginning of the book, she witnesses the moment that her fiancé realizes that he's in love with someone else. So she's completely heartbroken. We pick up with her 3 months later, and she's on her way to see her father in Indiana. Her father left her mother when she was only about 5 or 6 years old because he basically got another woman pregnant. So Ren went back to the UK And, her half sister got to grow up with her dad as her own. So Wren has kind of come back to stay with her father for maybe just a couple of weeks of the summer holidays. And she always feels like a visitor when she's visiting her stepfamily. But, over the course of a whole summer, which it ends up being, she, gets to know her family. And more importantly, she gets to know this very hot man who is the brother of the farmer who lives next door. So yeah, there's a whole sort of story with Anders and Jonas. Jonas is the farmer, and he's struggling with his mental health, and his brother Anders has come home for the summer to support him. And he and Wren literally bump into each other one night in a cornfield amongst fireflies, and she's a little bit drunk, and they end up, having quite a lot of banter. But it's a slow burn romance, and I have to stress that because it takes a while for things to really get going, because Anders is constantly keeping Wren at arm's length, and there is a reason for that. He's got this earth-shattering secret, which Wren will later find out, and which makes this a really impossible love story.
So how did you come up with the idea for this one? I was so curious as I was reading it.
Oh, okay. Well, I had a lot of different ideas. The moment where they bump into each other in the fields, I came up with that as I was walking around the fields near my home during the pandemic. It was nighttime, and I just imagined a character stumbling home drunk from a bar and bumping into a hot farmer. So that was the initial idea. And, little ideas like that will pop into my head at any given moment and usually somehow find their way into a book. But the story sort of hinges on this secret that Anders has and this situation. And, that's really the main idea that I had for this book, and I had it, years ago, and I've just been trying to think of the right way to use it. And I actually came up with the idea. I spent some time in Indianapolis when I was younger. And I remember hearing about this situation. And then in more recent years, a friend of a friend had this situation. And it's just the most heartbreaking thing to imagine for the people involved, that I just thought, what would I do? Yeah, that gave me this idea for Anders. What would he do in this situation? How will Wren handle it when she does discover the truth? And yeah, so it's a bit of a, like I say, an impossible love story.
It is. It's a difficult situation, and obviously no spoilers, which you're doing a wonderful job of describing everything that's happening without giving any spoilers. But it is just an impossible situation. And I was so curious as I was reading what it was building up to. And then when you revealed it, I was like, oh, and you just really sit there and think, what would I do in that situation?
Yeah, it's really tricky. And obviously I did a lot of research around it. I mean, I always do loads and loads of research, and I did so much research around this condition. And just some of the videos that I watched and the first hand accounts from people who had found themselves in a similar situation were just completely heartbreaking. I mean, it was a really emotional for me to write. And, I felt emotional for Anders, but I also felt emotional for one other character in particular who you don't meet until, later on down the line. And I think that was the hardest thing to write. It's funny, like I've had I've seen lots of Bookstagrammer reviews so far from people who've had early reading copies. And I haven't seen nobody has guessed the ending yet, which is, no one has guessed the twist. So it'll be interesting, once I start seeing actual, sort of reader reviews rolling in as to whether or not anyone will guess it. Seeing as we're talking about it such a lot, I wonder if they'll go into it thinking, oh, it must be this or it must be that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to find out.
It certainly will. So my next question was already going to be about you living in Indianapolis, which you mentioned. So this story has a little bit more of a personal note to you. You lived in Indianapolis, and then your dad was an IndyCar driver. So let's talk a little bit about that and why you decided to work that into the book.
Sure. Well, yes, I spent a bit of time in Indianapolis when I was a child, and that's, how I remember all the fireflies and things like that. And then in my 20s, my dad ran an Indy Lights team out of Indianapolis with Stefan Johansson. And I went back and spent some time there in my 20s and just really loved the city, made friends there. We went to so many of the places that I write about in the book, like there's the Ratskeller, this amazing German bar, and Fountain Square, where they go duckpin bowling, and just things like Middle Arts and Antiques, and all these different sort of places that I reference in the book are kind of places that I really loved. And in fact, Anders' apartment, he lives in this silk loft conversion, and that was the apartment that my parents lived in when I was there. So I was able to really write about things that I knew, and I just tend to do that all the time with all of my books. My books are set in places all around the world, and usually it's where I want to go on holiday, and I decide to set a book there or write some scenes there, because I've just found ever since my debut novel, Lucy in the Sky, that if I can go to the places that I'm writing about, and if I can write about real places, then it brings so much more of a connection to me and my characters. I mean, they feel extremely real to me. Anyone who's seen me like bawling my eyes out on Instagram will see, just how much of an emotional connection I build build with my characters. So yes, to write about places that I've also lived and experienced, was really nice. And I couldn't write about Indianapolis without including some sort of racing link. So Anders is a race engineer for an IndyCar team. And that was fun, just being able to include a little bit of that too.
We love to travel. And I completely agree with you that I think visiting some place or spending some time living there, whichever it is, really helps you bring the place to life, because it makes such a difference if you've read about some place or you've seen photos of it. But when you actually visit it, it's just so different than trying to conjure up the different things that are happening there if you haven't had boots on the ground.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I say, I just feel so connected to my characters if I can sit in the places that they would want to sit and look at what they might see. And it makes my readers feel as though they're there, because, they can just small details and things that they might see, just makes the story feel so much more realistic. So I think it's a really, really important part of my research.
I think that's exactly right. And the story does have a very strong sense of place. So in addition to Indianapolis, a lot of it is set on a farm in a more rural area in Indiana. So how did you decide on that aspect of the story for the setting?
Well, so initially when I came up with the idea of this girl sort of stumbling home drunk from a bar and bumping into a hot farmer under the stars, in the middle of a field, I was imagining UK. And it was only after that I started thinking, well, I haven't written about Indianapolis or Indiana before. And I was just imagining how much nicer that setting would be, just in cornfields and, with fireflies and big red barns, and I just, that just sold it to me. I had this really strong visual image of, the setting and just wanted to set it there. And then so much of the rest of the story kind of followed and, came on from that.
One of the things as I was looking through the reviews that's really resonating with people is the rural Indiana setting. People were really liking that it's on a farm and in rural America. So that clearly is a hit for people.
Oh, well, that's cool. And I mean, I did so much farming research. I don't think you'll realize when you're reading it, because you're not supposed to, like it's all just woven in, hopefully fairly seamlessly. But, I spoke to like the Indiana Department of Agriculture to sort of talk about Indiana farming. And, I found a farmer who has like a farm in sort of southern Indiana. And, he had a blog that he wrote in every 3 days, so I was just able to kind of like weave in different aspects of farming. And then I also just spoke to the farmer who lives in, like, basically owns the fields that I was walking around during the pandemic in. And that's a family farm that's been passed down for something like 250 years. And so that inspired, the idea of this farm, which is basically was created with Swedish settlers, many, many years ago, 170 years ago. And it's passed down from oldest brother to oldest brother. And so I was interested in that as a subject to explore as well, just this feeling of duty and, honor, sort of having to take over the family legacy, whether or not you wanted to or not. So that's where some of, there's some mental health issues that come in, which also is really relevant to farming. And yeah, Jonas, Anders' older brother, is the one who's taken on the farm. And the reason Anders has gone back home for the summer is because his older brother is having some mental health problems. So that was another subject that I needed to tackle when it came to farming.
You're doing a great job of leading me into my next question each time, because my next question was literally going to be, you have a Q&A in the back of the book, and it talks about farming and mental health and how prevalent depression is among farmers. I was fascinated by that. Why is that? Do you know?
Yeah, it's one of these professions that so much is out of your control. You're so dependent on the weather and, aspects and things that you just cannot control, that I think to be a farmer, it's a very uncertain profession. If it's raining too hard, you can't get out in the fields, even if you need to, and there's just so many things that can go wrong. I think the fact that farmers often have access to firearms, is obviously a very easy way out. But it is one of the highest professions for suicide, which is just, it really shocked me when I discovered that. So yeah, it was something that I wanted to shine a light on for sure.
I thought that was really interesting. It was definitely something I didn't know. And I was glad you included the mental health aspect, because I do think that is so important to everybody these days. There's just a lot of struggling with mental health, and to normalize the struggle and to understand that so many people are going through it, I think is wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Well, sibling relationships, that is something that is a big focus in the book, and I enjoyed that. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have an older brother.
And so did you wrap some of that into the story?
Not really. I don't tend to write about real things or sort of, real feelings and, real people so much. I'm so deep into the character's head when I'm writing, and I write my books quite quickly. So I'm just incredibly immersed in what she would be feeling and how she would be dealing with these different situations. So I don't really include, my own family scenarios so much. Sometimes I'll be writing a little bit from experience, but in this situation, not so much.
Well, and I guess there's two different sibling relationships here. There's Jonas and Anders, which were kind of standard in the same family brought up together. And then there's Ren and Bailey, who are step siblings and were not raised in the same home. So that would be a very different relationship.
Yes, completely. And Ren and Bailey are half sisters. Her father had an affair when Ren was about 5 years old and got this other woman pregnant. And her father chooses the other woman. So Ren's mother takes her back to the UK. And, basically Bailey, her half sister, gets to grow up, with her dad. And so that was a really tricky relationship to start with because, Ren only really knows her dad for maybe a couple of weeks a year. He doesn't know her, she doesn't really know him, but they'll catch up like once a year or so. But she kind of never really feels settled. She feels a bit like when they have this family dinner this one time, she feels like she's kind of walked in on somebody else's family dinner. And so she's a little, I kind of really played on the title of Only Love Can Hurt Like This. It's not just the romantic relationship between Ren and Anders, it's also to do with, this relationship she has with her father. And also her stepmother. I loved building that relationship with her and her stepmother because, they had a tricky situation when Ren was kind of coming over as a child. I think her stepmother Cheryl was very jealous and used to make Ren feel a bit uncomfortable. But just for her to now be back, she hasn't even seen her half-sister Bailey for 5 years. And Bailey's now a bit older. There's a 6-year age gap between them, but that's less noticeable now that Ren's 33 when the book begins and Bailey's, 27. So it was really, really lovely being able to write that relationship, where they go on this night out, have a bit of fun. Then you kind of realize that it's, still quite a surface relationship. And then over the course of the novel, they get to know each other on a deeper level. And, Ren and, Anders and Jonas, those brothers, like they're very close. And Ren sort of says, I wonder if one day Bailey and I will ever be that close. And I really think you see that starting to move in that direction by the end of the novel, which was a really heartwarming thing for me to be able to write.
Well, poor Ren, she just feels wrong-footed initially the whole time because she is kind of uncomfortable in this situation. She doesn't exactly know where she fits in. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of hurt from when she was younger, and she's just trying to work through some of that as well.
That's right. I mean, it's not really a conversation she's ever had with her dad because she doesn't really feel like she knows him well enough to be able to have that conversation. So she is just trying to find her way through it. And initially, she's only going to be there for 2 weeks. She knows that her dad's quite busy. They've bought this fruit picking farm, where they're living now, and they've got opening day sort of happening. And she knows that her dad's going to be busy, and she didn't mind, because she was just thinking, well, it's not that we're going to be sitting down having lots of heart-to-hearts anyway. And and then something happens that means that Ren can stay longer. And then once she does, and once they kind of break through this awkwardness into more of a family, and once she realizes as well that she's had preconceptions about them that she's got wrong. And then that's really lovely how it kind of unfolds from there, and that relationship develops and becomes a bit deeper.
It's a good reminder for everyone that sometimes you come into a relationship with all of these preconceived notions, and that to try to set those aside and just focus on the here and now and what's really happening.
Absolutely. And it's so easy to do that, isn't it? Like everybody does it. Everyone, assumes that, that person's been a bit rude to me. What have I done? What have I done wrong, to cause them to be a bit rude? And actually that person's probably just having a bad day because something bad happened to them, which has nothing to do with you, and it's that sort of, that kind of misconception and, misunderstanding, I think, that can lead to, difficulties when you don't know someone well enough to really know, what's upsetting them, or, if you've just misunderstood a situation.
Exactly. Or it has absolutely nothing to do with you, as you mentioned. And that's something I always was telling my kids when they were younger. Like, don't take it personally. It's probably related to something totally different, if this person was unkind to you. But then it's hard to remember it yourself. So I was laughing, thinking, I know that happens to me sometimes. And it's a good way to remember to just wipe the slate clean.
Yeah, absolutely.
So toward the end, you switch perspectives as you're telling the story. Did you always decide to do that? Or was that something that you came to as you were writing? How did that work?
Yes, usually with my books, I know exactly how they're going to pan out. I know exactly, how the whole story is going to unfold, right down to the last moment. But that did take me by surprise. Like I got to that point in the story and I was just like, oh, I think we might need to see it from this other character's perspective and really kind of witness what's been going on. And that was when all of the emotion for me, like there were moments up until that point which, made my eyes prick with tears. But from that moment that I switched characters and was really able to get inside that person's head and see what they were going through, that for me was that was when all of my emotion came absolutely pouring out of me, and just, it was heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking, but also it was helpful to understand a little bit more what was going on and understand that character's motivations.
Yes, because I think for some readers, maybe they won't understand that. I think Ren is she's quite forgiving and quite understanding, not initially when she discovers this, this whole situation, this impossible situation. But when she kind of comes to understand it a little bit more, and certainly I think it does help. You're right, to be inside that character's head, to really understand what that's like, to sort of imagine putting yourself in that position even more and living in that moment. Because I write all of my books from the first person present tense because I really love to be inside the character's head, experiencing what they're experiencing as they're experiencing it. But yes, I very rarely switch into a different character. So I found that I was an emotional wreck when I did that. So it'd be interesting to know if the readers are too.
So let's talk about your cover. I'm a huge cover person, but I'm not really a fan of all of the graphic, cartoony romance covers. So I love your cover. Do you just love it?
I absolutely love it. The second I saw it, I was just like, yes, they have nailed it. Because all of my UK covers as well, basically, when I started writing, my earlier books are a little bit more, they're a bit lighter, a bit funnier. There's always some moment in there that makes me want to cry. And I think I've cried with every single one of my books. I do write sort of emotional love stories rather than rom-coms. But I don't think you really get that feeling from so many of my earlier covers, that they look like rom-coms. So this was perfect. It was all about, I remember when I changed publishers and I was, sort of said to my new publisher, Penguin, I really want to find a publisher who can nail what an emotional love story looks like, because there aren't that many of them, there are not that many authors to my knowledge who write the sort of books that I write. Like Colleen Hoover is one of my absolute favorite authors. I've been reading her books since 2013 and I just kind of wanted to try and capture that. And so for them to, come up with this sort of exploding flower, it kind of, I think it's absolutely beautiful. I love the colors as well, but, you just get this essence that this perfect thing is not so perfect. And then with the title, Only Love Can Hurt Like This, I really think my publishers nailed it.
I agree completely. And the flower even looks like it could have been kind of in the shape of a heart, and as it's exploding, like it's a larger heart. I know it isn't, but it just kind of has that look about it. I think they did a wonderful job.
Oh, great. Yes. I'm super, super happy. And I'm really thrilled as well, because my publisher Putnam we've just signed another book deal. So, and I've also taken 4 of my backlist books. So I'm really excited. My American journey is beginning today, but there's hopefully a long road ahead, which is, really, really exciting.
Oh, that is really exciting. Congratulations on that as well.
Thank you.
Well, before we wrap up, what have you read recently that you really liked?
Well, actually, it's out today. Happy Place by Emily Henry. I absolutely love that. So thoroughly recommend that one. And the other one that I've just read recently, which I really enjoyed, is Beth O'Leary's The Wake Up Call. And that I don't think that's out for another 6 months or so, but definitely add that one to your basket, because I think you'll really enjoy it. I love Beth's really warm style of writing. And Emily Henry is just one of my favorite authors. So I'd definitely recommend those two.
Emily Henry is so popular, as well as Beth O'Leary. She's the Flatshare writer, right?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
My daughter loves her. So that's good to know that there's another one coming up.
Absolutely.
Well, Paige, thank you so much for joining me today on the Thoughts from a Page podcast. This was so much fun to chat, and good luck getting Only Love Can Hurt Like This out into the world.
Thank you so much. And yes, I'm looking forward to seeing pictures of it on supermarket and bookshop shelves.
So exciting.
Thank you so much, Cindy. It was lovely to talk to you.
Why is it that with sparkling water, I'm always playing guessing games with what flavor I'm drinking? Is it citrus? Is it aluminum can flavored? Not sure. Sparkling ice, though, they really mean flavor. Like in-your-face flavor. Orange mango, black raspberry. Don't even get me started on the strawberry lemonade. Kiwi Strawberry slid right into my taste buds DMs last night and let them know who's boss. No subtleties there, and no sugar either. But it does have vitamins and antioxidants. Find sparkling ice at a major grocery store or club retailer near you. Sparkling ice. Anything but subtle.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. If you like this episode, and I hope you did, please follow me on Instagram at Thoughts From a Page. Consider joining my Patreon group to access bonus content and support the podcast. Tell all of your friends about the show and rate it or subscribe to it wherever you listen to your podcasts. I would really appreciate it. The book discussed in this episode can be purchased at my bookshop storefront, and the link is in the show notes. I hope you'll tune in next time.
My name's Adam Sokol, and I'm the host of the Passions and Prologues podcast. Every week, best-selling authors like Jenny Jackson, Rebecca Mackay, Lisa Scottolini, or Brad Meltzer come on to my show to talk about, yes, their new books, but more importantly, the things that they're crazy passionate about. We've talked about the Muppets, powerlifting, traveling, gardening, home improvement, and so much more. We dig into why these things are their passions, how they inspire their writing, and where they came to fall in love with these random assorted things. Be sure to subscribe to the Passions and Prologues podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and check out evergreenpodcast.com to learn more.